In this video we're gonna set the player enemy attack function, okay, and the player will take damage. Okay, when the player lose health, it will destroy itself. Okay, enemy will attack. Okay, so without furthering delay, let's dive into this topic. So go to enemy. Okay, go to enemy, right click and create an empty child game object in the enemy. Okay, and call it something like attack point. And what we're gonna do, we're gonna select an icon. Okay, we're gonna select an icon and we're gonna move it over here, something like that. Okay, we're gonna move it over here. So what we're gonna do, we're gonna create a circle around this attack point. Okay, and if that circle collide with this player or this player layer, okay, so what we're gonna do, we're gonna firstly we're gonna give some health amount to our player, and player will take damage if this circle collide with our player. And we will call that function only through our enemy attack clip. Okay, we're gonna call it not ideal or not run. So we're gonna call it from enemy attack. If we select the enemy and if we go to animation tab, and if we select the enemy attack, and we're gonna call this function over here. So what we need to do, we need to add event. Okay, over here add event, and from here we're gonna call that attack function. Okay, for now we're gonna delete this, and we're gonna what we're gonna do, so we need to create an script for that. Okay, to make things simple, so go over to assets. Okay, project assets, right click, create C# script, name that script to enemy attack. Okay, something like that, and select the enemy and drag that script to enemy at component section. So what we're gonna do, we're gonna drag that script and we're gonna attach this script to our enemy. Okay, so enemy, and double click it to open up in Visual Studio. Okay, double click it to open up in Visual Studio. So what we're gonna do, we're gonna create a separate function. We're gonna remove this start and update function, we don't need it for now. So what we're gonna do, we're gonna create public, we're gonna make it public, and we're gonna call it through our enemy attack animation. So that's why we need to make it public, and we have to type for function, and we're gonna call something like attack, something like that. Okay, make first bracket and this curly brackets. Okay, so what we're gonna do, to create circle around our attack point, we have to use this function. Okay, physics 2d, physics 2d. Okay, physics 2d dot overlap circle. So we have to use this function, and this function will take the position from you where you want to create the circle, and the second thing, it will take the radius of that circle, and the third thing, it will check, it will take the layer mask. Layer mask, basically we're gonna choose player layer. Okay, we're gonna, as a layer mask, we're gonna choose player. So we're gonna only target the player layer. Okay, so what we're gonna do, we need to assign those variable into top. So what we're gonna comment it out, and we're gonna make empty field of a transform, basically position transform mean. So we're gonna make it public so we can see in inspector. So we're gonna drag that attack point, and the type will be transform. Okay, basically position, and we're gonna call it something like attack point. Okay, attack point, and we need a layer mask, and we're gonna choose a layer mask our player. So we want to target the player layer only. So we're gonna make it public to say it in inspector, and the type of that component will be layer mask, and we're gonna call it something like player layer. I'm gonna leave it as a layer mask. Okay, you're gonna call it something like that. Okay, and we also have to specify the radius of that circle. Okay, the type of that variable will be float. So we're gonna make it public to adjust in inspector. It will be float type, and we're gonna call it something like attack radius or radius short. And by default you can set any value like that. I'm going to select 1.2f, something like that. Okay, 2f, and control s on your keyboard, and we need to assign this variable. So head again to Unity. So we will able to see in enemy attack script, we will able to see the first will appear the position, attack point position. So what we need to drag this attack point position into that field. So we will have the attack point, and the second thing, we will see the layer mask. We will choose as a layer player layer. We want only wanna target the player layer. So that's why. So just as you can see attack point which says none. So what we're gonna do, we're gonna drag this attack point into attack point position. Now we have the position, and a layer mask is selected nothing. So what we're gonna do, we're gonna select the player layer. Okay, before that what you have to do, go to player game object. Okay, in the inspector, right, as you can see layer with selected default. So what we're gonna do, we're gonna assign this layer, this game object player, as a player layer. So click on this and add layer. Okay, name that player and head again to that player game object once again and assign that layer to player layer. Okay, player, and I'm gonna do it no, or this object only, and then overrides and then apply all. Do after doing that, we're gonna go to enemy. Okay, as you can see layer mask selected nothing. So what we're gonna do, we're gonna choose the player layer. So we will only target the player layer. Okay, and we also have specified the radius. So what we're gonna do, we're gonna go over to attack, attack function once again, and we're gonna use this function. Okay, physics 2d dot overlap circle. So this function will take the position from where you want to create the circle. We want to create the circle attack point. Okay, sorry, attack point dot position, and as a second parameter we have to pass the radius. So we're going to pass the attack radius. Okay, and we by default we set 1.2 unit, as you can see. So it will create a circle around attack point position, and the radius will be 1.2, but we can adjust in the inspector, so that's why we made it public. And the third thing, it will take the layer mask. So we're going to pass the layer mask, as we know we have chosen the layer mask, our player layer. Okay, so this function over here, physics 2d dot overlap circle. Okay, this function will be true or false if the circle is colliding with our player layer, layer. So this function over here will be true, else it will be false. So what we're gonna do, we're gonna put this function into a variable. Okay, so what we're gonna do, we're gonna create a collider. Okay, we're gonna create a collider variable, collider 2d, and we're gonna call it something like heat or heat info, something like that. I'm gonna call it heat equal to this. So this physics 2d overlap circle will be true or false. Okay, if the circle is collide with our player layer, so the heat over here will be true. Basically this function will be true, so the heat over here will be true, else it will be false, so the heat over here will be false. So what we're gonna do, if heat is true, basically if the circle is colliding with our player layer, so what we're gonna do, we're gonna print out the, firstly we're gonna check if it's working or not. So what we're gonna do, we're gonna print out the name what we hit. So we're gonna debug.log. So what we have to do, we can extract info like name, tag, colliders by going to this hit parameter. Okay, hit dot, let's suppose we're gonna print out the name. Firstly we're gonna go to that game object transform component. By transform component we're gonna access the name of that game object, and control as on your keyboard to save this. Okay, but we are never calling this function over here. As you can see, we're not calling this function. We're gonna call this function only in animation clip. Okay, enemy attack animation clip, we're gonna call this function over there. Okay, so control s on your keyboard to save this, and head again to unity and choose the enemy and go to animation tab. Okay, and select the enemy attack animation clip, and from there we're gonna call this enemy attack function. Okay, as enemy attack function, firstly we have to go to this enemy attack script, then we're gonna access that attack function because we made it public, so we will able to see that. So select the enemy and go to animation. Okay, and select the enemy attack animation. So over here if we select the enemy, something like over here we're gonna call this function. Okay, we're gonna call that function. So add, so you have to add event, as you can see in the over here. So what we're gonna do, we're gonna go to firstly enemy attack script, and then methods basically means function. Okay, function. So we're gonna access this attack function, as you can see. So attack function, we're gonna select this attack function. Okay, so so if we play, okay, if we play, so we will able to see the player name. Okay, player will print out, because as we know we assigned our player game object as a player layer, and we are just only targeting the player layer. So we will print out the name of the player game object, because we the circle will collide with our player layer. okay, as you can see player. But as you can see, we not able to see the circle, okay, we are not able to see the circle, so we also need to adjust the circle too. So to see, we have to use on draw gizmo selected function, that is inbuilt function of Unity. So what we need to do, we need to go over to enemy attack script once again. We have to type this on draw gizmo selected gizmo. You have to type the same function name, okay, or else it not gonna work. So what we're gonna do, we're gonna draw circle. So we have to use this gizmos dot draw where sphere, okay, where sphere, and this function over here will take the position from where you want to create the circle, and the second parameter, it will take the radius. So we're gonna pass the attack point as a first parameter, okay. So we're gonna pass the attack point. From attack point we're gonna create the circle, and we also have to pass the attack radius, okay. We're gonna pass the radius as a attack radius. By default, as you can see, we selected 1.2 unit in the top. So what we're gonna do, but it will give you an error if you haven't assigned the attack point. Basically, if you haven't dragged the attack point to attack point slot, okay, transform field. So but the if you haven't assigned it, so this function will try to find the attack point. But as you know, if you haven't dragged the attack point to attack point field, so it will try to find the attack point, but it will not get if you haven't assigned that, okay, if you haven't dragged it. So it will throw us an error, okay, an error. So what we need to do, we need to check if we have assigned it or not. So we're gonna check if attack point, okay, if attack point is equals to null. Basically if attack point field is empty, it means is equal to null. So what we're gonna do, we're gonna return, we're gonna call this line, so we're gonna avoid the error, okay. Firstly, what we are saying, if the attack point is equal to null, basically if we haven't dragged the attack point to attack point field, means it's empty. So what we are doing, we are just returning. After return, this line won't get called, because after return this line will not be execute, okay. So control s on your keyboard to save this and head again to Unity. So if we don't assign the attack point, if we haven't dragged the attack point, we will not able to see the circle, okay. That function, that line of code will not be execute if we haven't assigned. But as you can see, we have already assigned it. We dragged the attack point to attack point field, as you can see. So that's why we are able to see the circle. So what we're gonna do, we're gonna adjust the circle through our by our enemy attack animation. So what we're gonna do, select the animation tab, okay, and go to enemy attack. We're gonna adjust the radius of this circle about this sort, okay. So what we're gonna do, we're gonna make it little like this much. Now it's great. So 0.82, okay. So what we're gonna do, so we are printing out the name of this game object, okay, player game object, when the circle is colliding, and we are calling that attack function only in attack animation, okay. So that's why we just only gonna print out when the enemy attack the player. So what we're gonna do, we're gonna give some health to our player, okay. We're gonna give some health to our player whenever this circle, okay, whenever the enemy attacks us, so player will take damage, okay. And we're gonna subtract from our health by 1 unit, something like that amount, okay. So what we're gonna do, we're gonna create a separate script. So what you need to do, go to assets, right click, create C# script, name that script to something like player health, okay, and select the player and drag that script to add component section, okay. So I already have created this player health script, so I'm gonna just drag it to add component section, okay, and double click it to open up in Visual Studio. So what we're gonna do, we don't need these two functions for now. We're gonna remove this, okay. So firstly we're gonna assign a enemy health. So we're gonna make it public, so we can set in the inspector, and the type of that will be integer, whole numbers like 1 2 3 4, and we're gonna call it something like max health, by default you can set any value. Let's suppose I'm gonna give player to 5 amount of health. Okay, health. And what we're gonna do, we're gonna create a take damage function. Okay, and we're gonna make it public. We're gonna call that take damage function through another script, so that's why we're gonna make it public. And whenever we call that function, we're gonna subtract from our max health by 1 unit. So what we're gonna do, we're gonna make it public. So we have to make it public to call from another script. Okay, we're gonna call it from our enemy attack script, because over there we checking if the circle is colliding with the player layer or not. So we're gonna call from there. So that's why we are making it public, and we have to type for function, and we're gonna call it something like take damage. Okay, take damage. And we're gonna pass parameter, we're gonna call it integer, we're gonna pass integer value, we're gonna call it damage. Basically we're gonna replace this damage by 1 unit. Okay, so what we're gonna do, we're gonna subtract from our max health by this amount of damage. Let's suppose as a parameter, okay, damage parameter we pass 1. So if we call this function, okay, as we set max health by default 5. So if we call this function, so 5 minus equal damage. Let's suppose if we pass as a damage parameter 1. Okay, so max health is 5, so 5 minus 1 will be 4. So if we call the for the first time, so the max health will be 4. Okay, if we call the second time, so 4 minus 1 will be 3. If we call the third time, so 3 minus 1 will be 2. If we call the fourth time, so 2 minus 1 will be 1. If we call fifth time, so 1 minus 1 will be 0. So it will somehow hit 0. So if the max health is our 0, okay, and if we call this function, so 0 minus 1 will be minus 1, so it will go to negative value. So what we're gonna do, we're gonna keep track if the max health is 0, so we're not going to call this line of code. So this will not execute. So what we're gonna do, we're gonna check over here. We're gonna set if max health. Okay, if max health is lesser than or equal to 0. So, okay, equal to 0. So what we're gonna do, we're gonna return. So what basically we are doing, if the max health is 0, let's suppose we have max health 1. So as a damage parameter, we're gonna pass, let's suppose we're gonna pass 1. So 1 minus 1 will be 0. So if we call one more time, so 0 minus 1 will be minus 1, but it will go to negative. So it will, the max health will be minus 1. So what we are doing over here, we are checking if the max health is already 0. So we're not gonna call this line of code. So it will stack in the 0. So this line won't get called. So 0 minus 1 not gonna call. So this will be stuck in the 0. Okay, so I hope you get the idea. So control s on your keyboard to save this. So whenever we calling this function, it will subtract from our max health by damage parameter. Let's suppose we're gonna pass damage parameter. You can pass anything, any value like integer value 1 2, but I'm gonna pass 1. So if we call the for the first time, so max health is 5, so 5 minus 1 will be 4. Okay, if we call the first time. Enemy attack script. Okay, from there we are checking if the circle is colliding with the our player or not. So we're gonna call from there. Instead of printing out the name, okay, name of the game object, we're gonna call that function. So we're gonna open up the enemy attack function. Okay, double click it to open up enemy attack function, and we're gonna call it from here. Okay, so as you can see, if the circle is colliding with the player layer, this hit becomes true. So if the hit is true, hit just we are printing out the name of the player. As you can see, transform dot name. So instead of printing out the name, what we're gonna do, we're gonna call that take damage function from our player. So what we have to do, we have to firstly go to hit. Okay, and we have to get the component. We need to grab the player health script. Okay, player health, we have to grab the player health script. okay, player health script. By this we into firstly we are going to player health script, then we're gonna access this take damage function, okay, and we made this public, so we're gonna call this function from here. So dot take damage, okay, and you have to pass the argument as a damage parameter. So I'm gonna pass 1, you can pass any value you like, so I'm gonna pass 1, so it will subtract from our max health by 1 unit, okay. So firstly what we are doing, we are calling this attack function via our enemy attack animation, as you seen, okay. So firstly this function checking if the circle is colliding with the player layer or not. If the circle is colliding with the player layer, so what we are doing, firstly we are, we obviously know we selected our player as a player layer, so we have in the player we have attached the player health script. So we are getting, firstly we are going to hit, then we are getting the player health script. As we know, we attach the player health script to our player, so we are just getting the player health script, and then dot we are accessing the, we are calling the take damage function, and we made it public, so that's why we are able to call this function. And as a argument we pass 1, you can pass any value like you like, okay. So control s on your keyboard to save this and head again to unity. So whenever the enemy attack to player, whenever the player gets near to enemy, and enemy will play the attack animation. From attack animation we are calling that attack function, and attack function firstly checking if the circle is colliding with the player layer or not. If it's colliding, we are calling the take damage function from our player health, and take damage function will subtract from our player health by 1 unit, okay. So so if we hit play, if we hit play and if we go get near to enemy, okay, and if we select the player, okay, by default as you can see max health we set 5 unit. If we get near to, as you can see, it's become free to 1, and it is stuck in the 0 because we are returning. If the our player health already becomes 0, max health becomes 0, we are not calling that max health minus equal damage line, okay. If we go to player health, as you can see, we are not calling this line, because we already returning if the max health is already our 0. So what we're gonna do, we're gonna check, okay, we're gonna create a update function, because update function, as you know, it call every single frame, and we need to check every single frame if we need to keep track if the max health of player is lesser than or equal to 0, okay. We need to keep track every single frame, so that's why we're gonna check if our max health, okay, if our max health is lesser than, okay, is lesser than or equal to 0. If that is the case, what we're gonna do, we're gonna destroy the player game object. Before destroying, what we're gonna do, we're gonna print out the we're gonna print out a message player diet, something like that. So we're gonna make a function, okay. We have to make a void and die, we're gonna call it die, and you have to make first bracket then curly brackets, and we are not assigning something like private public, so this by default it will, this function b will be private, okay. So what we're gonna do, we're gonna print out, okay, debug.log in the console something like player diet, okay, something like player diet, okay, player diet, and we're gonna call this function, okay. We're gonna call this function over here if the max health is lesser than or equal to 0. So what we're gonna do, we're gonna call that die function, and the die function, as you can see, it will print out the message in the console player diet, as you can see. So we are doing an update function because update function calls every single frame, so it will be accurate, so that's why, okay. Control s on your keyboard to save this and head again to unity, okay. Head again to unity and you will able to see, so you will able to see, just wait for to compile, and if we hit play, okay, and you also need to override then apply all to change in the prefab as well. So this player health or whatever you change, it will saved in the prefab as well, okay. So so if we hit play, we will able to see when the player max health becomes 0, we calling that die function, and die function will print out the message in the console says player died, okay. So if we get near to the enemy, So as you can see, it's become 0, and when it's becomes 0, player died message popping out multiple times, because we are doing it update function, and as you know, update function get call every single frame. So what we're gonna do, we're gonna destroy the player game object. Okay, so what we have to do, we have to use this destroy function, and destroy function will take the game object you want to destroy. So we want to destroy this dot game object, basically means the player game object itself. Okay, control s, and head back to unity once again. Okay, head back to unity once again. If we play, if we play, and if the player max health becomes 0, we will destroying the game object itself, means the player game object itself. Okay, control s on your keyboard to save this, and head again to unity. Once you, if we play, okay, if we play, and if the player max health becomes 0, we destroying the game object itself, means the player game object itself. Okay, just wait for to compile and you will able to see that. Okay, just wait for to compile. And if we go near to enemy, so as you can see, we destroyed the player game object. Okay, so I hope you get the idea basics of enemy attack. Okay, if you did, so if you enjoyed this video like this, okay, and share it with your friends. And if you are new to my channel, then subscribe it for future tutorials. And if you want to support me, you can support me on patreon.com. Okay, and lastly, thanks for watching this video. Okay, goodbye.